Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This is a preseason, right? Because we have two podcasts today. So if you think you just saw Owen, you did. We just got done with the University of Indiana podcast. We are back. Josh, good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
And we're going to be breaking down the Jaguars and the Raiders. We're going to talk about what schemes they run or what we think they'll run, and then kind of correlate their draft class a little bit to the schemes. But before we get going, Josh, how is the summer progressing? And you ready for your new gig to start?
Yeah, no, definitely ready to get into the fall, get into college recruiting. But in the meantime, we're still here every Wednesday on the Draft Professor podcast, going over 2 NFL teams for you guys during the off season. We'll be back on Mondays as well. I'll be doing college football post-week stuff going into the season. So we'll be back around. Definitely ready to get back into the swing of things, though. Good to have some downtime, though, in the summer. You try to stay involved as much as you can, but you don't want to over-scout and drain yourself for the season where a lot of your time is going.
And Owen, what's it like to be like a college graduate transitioning to a master's degree? And I know that you've got a new high school football coach, and how is all that going?
So I just finished up my last week of the summer semester, so I'm finally getting a true summer where I get to kind of finally wind down a bit from when I actually graduated and I went right into schooling again. But it's nice. I think I'm definitely not as stressed out as I was when I was an undergrad student and was confused on trying to figure out where I was going to go. I'm sure Josh, you've gotten yourself on the right track more so than I was. I was kind of bouncing around different things, and I ended up landing on the UB's thing, and I thought I was going the right way. And then, some things change, some things move around, but it's always fun because then even though I was busy, or even now when I have more free time, I just have more time to do this stuff with you, Jim. I know, Josh, you're talking about not burning yourself out. I step away from everything that has to do with this stuff until Jim sends me a list of players to watch, and then we just did Indiana. And I am a total 100% believer. I know you said you don't want to burn yourself out, but if you ever get to watch, anytime soon. We just talked about D'Angelo Pons and he's a corner, and then Mikhail Kamara. I'm total love boat dream hard eyes about these guys as day 2 players, and they're amazing. I love them so much. So I'm getting the fire back a little bit now that I had some free time. Took the gas off the brake, or gas off the pedal, and then now I'm back in it. No, we're back in.
I'll say something about the Indiana roster before we get going. I think last year they overexceeded expectations more than anybody could ever imagine. I don't think it's far-fetched to say they're going to finish with the same record, or should have the expectations still finish in the same way. Let's think about it. That Indiana team last year, they barely had anybody make it into the NFL. A lot of guys stayed, and they got a lot of good people from the transfer portal. Don't be surprised if you see 5, 6, 7 guys from Indiana get drafted this year, because they are loaded on both offense and defense for draftable players.
I think based upon what we covered, if I'm counting, it's 5 guys in the top 100 is a reasonable expectation to have. What do you think, Owen?
Yeah, I think just looking at the guys that I graded that would probably finish in the top 100 for me would be Mendoza, the quarterback. With the quarterback multiplier, obviously. Elijah Surratt, the wide receiver, or Elijah Surratt, however you say that. Mikhail Kamara, D'Angelo Pons, and I think. Oh, and I'd Roman Hemby in that in late round 3, early round 4, and then even as a guy like Aiden Fisher could definitely jump up into that top 150 range. So they got some guys. Definitely.
Cool. Well, why don't we dive into the Jacksonville Jaguars? New coach, so the schemes of last year may be less relevant. But Josh, what would be your initial thought on the type of running scheme the Jaguars would favor based upon the coach and the roster?
Now, I would lean more towards ETN being the starting guy still going into the season just because of the amount of experience he has. And if you think about it in totality, even though Tanks Bigsby has contributed a lot over the past couple years, at full health, ETN is the best running back on this team. He should demand 60% of the snaps if he produces like he's capable of. But we've seen with Liam Cohen in Tampa Bay and in Los Angeles before that, he's not afraid to use 3 running backs in a single game and all give them equal amount of work just to keep fresh legs on the field. But somebody will emerge out of that group, whether it's Tank Bigsby taking another step in his development, whether it's ETN getting back on the right track, or if it's Brayshaw Tootin or LaQuint Allen, one of those 2 rookie running backs that they drafted on day 3. Tootin would probably be the most likely of those 2 to take over as that main guy. He's got the speed, explosiveness, all the breakaway traits you're looking for. Kind of like what they were trying to get with Bucky Irving, like going down the same direction, a little bit of a different style, but that type rookie running back earning his way onto the field and then taking over the starting reps once we get into the middle and later parts of the season. But I would fully expect ETN to still get 60% of the snaps going into the year. Let's see how these rookie running backs develop and if Tank Bigsby takes over the starting role as well.
So, Owen, how about you? How would you look at the Jaguars running game? And
Yeah,
what kind of do you think?
So Liam Cohen, I have a little bit of his history for like where his offensive skill or his offensive coaching tree comes from, specifically in the NFL. He's majority of the time when he was an offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he was under Sean McVay. Same with the OC hired Grant Udinski. He was under Kevin O'Connell and Matt Rule, and similar in that McVay Shanahan offensive scheme. So that's what they're probably going to be running. Like they did, I think we're going to see a lot of what you saw what they did with Tampa Bay last year. And I know this is a podcast about the other Florida team, but imagine not thinking Bucky Irving was going to be good. Couldn't have been me. But anyway, I between that, they did have when Liam Cohen was the offensive coordinator for Kentucky in 2023. They had Ray Davis there. That was a bit more of a power gap scheme, but they had the blockers there to really pull that off, and it was kind of more of adjusting to the players he had in Kentucky for the 1 year he was their offensive coordinator. But all the time he's been there, whether it was between being the offensive coordinator for the Rams with the running back stable they had over there, or now being the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers with the kind of players that they tended to go for and the run schemes they ran last year, it's going to be a lot more of that Shanahan zone scheme where they're able to let guys get into space and cut. I think you see that a lot with the selection of Bashal Tootin. He's a guy who's going to work well in that kind of system, as well as Travis Etienne. He's going to be someone who's going to excel more so in that than maybe a gap power scheme. They do have Tank Bigsby, who could maybe be more of that in between the tackles kind of runner, but for what the personnel they have there, including like their you look at their offensive line, they have guys who are good athletes who can move in space between Ezra Cleveland, Anton Harrison, even some of their backups, you see like Luke Fortner. They have players that can definitely move, and they'll be having competitions there. So I expect them to be more of that Shanahan zone scheme style running offense.
Okay, and flipping to the Jaguars passing game. Josh, what's your assessment of Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars passing game?
I think Trevor Lawrence's future is going to be dependent on this year and how he finishes this season, in my opinion. If you looked at what Doug Peterson has run, more of like not really an air raid, but kind of the modern day air raid offense where he's spreading it on all 3 levels of the field. It's a lot of deep crosser routes, a lot of slot routes, just trying to spread the ball to all 3 levels of the field. You didn't see the consistency with Trevor Lawrence there. We saw with Liam Cohen going to Tampa Bay, he condensed everything with tight formations, a lot of pre-snap motions, making shit simple for Baker Mayfield, and where you started really seeing him get comfortable into his peak where we all once saw Baker Mayfield once was. He got to that level this year. I think he's going to do the same thing in Jacksonville, and they got the wide receiver weapons that can really get this going from the jump. Brian Thomas Jr. as the typical X that can play a bunch of different positions. He already had an amazing year last year as a rookie. Don't expect the exact same thing from him. And with the addition of Travis Hunter this year being that prototypical Z receiver, you can move him around the line of scrimmage, work those intermediate routes. He can be a deep ball, jump ball threat. He's an elite He's got elite ball skills on both sides of the ball, so he could get a lot of touches right there. A lot of condensed formations, think that when you're thinking about the future of this offense, and I think that will do a lot for Trevor Lawrence, slowing him down mentally a little bit, kind of keeping him composed, so those accuracy issues over the middle of the field don't show up as often for the Jaguars.
And Owen, how about you? What's your assessment of Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars passing game?
So I think you see the Jags specifically for the way they're built, their wide receivers right now are kind of perfect for having a guy like Liam Cohen step in and be able to replicate what he did in Tampa Bay. So it's not going to be the same style. I think you have a guy in Lawrence who is a bit physically more talented than a guy like Baker Mayfield, but maybe isn't quite the quarterback when it comes to processing, accuracy, consistency that Baker was under Cohen. So when it comes to what they're going to want to run, it's going to be a lot of deep shots when it comes to Brian Thomas Jr. being able to take the top off an offense, be able to spread that out, have him go there and create space, allow for these receivers to work in the middle of the field and underneath. Specifically, like Travis Hunter being more in that Chris Godwin role if he does see a lot of action. If not that, he'll be more maybe so that slot receiver type they saw with like Jalen McMillan last season, where they're going to probably hope to replicate with Nakabuka now that they drafted him. And you have Diami Brown, who's an addition this season that could be maybe that Chris Godwin type as the Z receiver, whereas Brian Thomas Jr. is more your Mike Evans clone, where he's going to be the big-bodied X who can push the ball down the field and go up and win you some contested catches. So they have the pieces to replicate what he had going for him in Tampa Bay, whether between both the run game, marrying itself with the pass game, which is kind of the key thing with the Brendan Shanahan or with the Kyle Shanahan offenses, where you're going to be running a lot of wide zone and then you're working a lot of play action off of that, where your run concepts and your play action concepts all look the exact same. So you're keeping the defense honest. And that also opens up more things over the middle of the field, as well as, and then when you are attacking the middle of the field, you're stuck in the safeties and be able to hit it over the top with like Brian Thomas Jr. So you're going to see a lot of levels concepts, a lot of crossers, and a lot of play action built into this offense, where Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to get some time to pass, especially in some moving pockets, use his legs a bit more, and then has 3 levels of weapons to attack with, whether it's going to be Diami Brown over the middle and like 10 yards of depth, Brian Thomas Jr. down the field on a post or a go route, and then you also have like a slot receiver and Travis Hunter who'll be more so in that 5 to 10 yard range where he can hit that if it's nothing else is going for him there.
Okay, and let's pivot to the Jaguars defense. Josh, any thoughts on the type of scheme the Jaguars will run on defense?
It's going to be very interesting this year because we both know that they want to revolve their things around their edge rushers, getting home with Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines Allen. They got the linebackers that give them that comfortability and run support and in coverage, with Devin Lloyd really taking a step in his development, and Oluokun, who's been a staple in run defense over the tenure of his career in Jacksonville. But this secondary is going to be really interesting to see if they can stay healthy and if they can play multiple roles instead of being a straight nickel defense. They got Jerry Jones, who was the nickel back drafted last year, is going to be stepping in that left cornerback role. You obviously drafted Travis Hunter for that side of the ball, and he says that he can play 100% of the snaps in the game. That's just not going to happen. There's going to be snaps on defense where he doesn't take the field, and they supplemented with Jordan Lewis in the offseason, also drafting Caleb Brands now as that hybrid defender, could play nickel if need be, but he's more of a safety type. But really, this is an inexperienced secondary when you think about the continuity and chemistry they have. A lot of free agent signings on top of second-year guys with Darnell Savage and Jerry Jones. Really, Tyson Campbell is the only long tenured proven guy on this defense, and he is shut down when he's healthy, but the health has been a big question for him over the past couple years of his career. So it's all going to be dependent on this defense, most specifically their secondary, to see how many different looks they can line up in, how many looks they can give the offense instead of staying kind of in a base formation at all times and hoping that they just don't get beat. It's going to put a lot of stress on this defensive coordinator if these secondary players don't step up immediately for this team.
Owen, how about you? How do you see the Jaguars defense?
Yeah, so defensive coordinator is going to be Anthony Campanelli, I think is his name, how you pronounce it. He comes from the coaching trio. He worked under Brian Flores and Vic Fangio when they were both defensive coordinators in Miami from 2020 to 2023. Then he was over in Green Bay working under Jeff Hafley, who came over from Boston College, and Robert Saleh, who was a defensive assistant kind of overseeing some of that Packers defense later on in the season. Now he's moved on to the 49ers. So I think you're going to see a lot of the more Fangio style deep coverage, whether it's going to be cover 3 or cover 4 systems, where you're going to have 4 down linemen, some deeper zone coverages up top, and then allowing them to have some more underneath coverage when it comes to their linebackers, run a lot of nickel corner to be able to attack that seam in the middle there, and not allowing some shots to be hit to them where they like to hit in the 10 to 15-yard range. So I do think they're going to run an even front there. So you're going to see Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker be more hand in the dirt, pass rushers, run defenders having to be able to play consistently down to down. I think that's why you also see them bringing guys like DeJuan Smoot and Emmanuel Ogbah, who have experience in those kind of systems, especially like Ogbah, who was in Miami with their defense coordinator when he was there as even front defensive lineman for those Flores and Fangio schemes. So you're going to see a lot of that, a lot of stunting, a lot of ability to try to push the pocket with designed pressures, like kind of similar to what we saw with the Fangio and the Eagles defensive line this past season, especially in that Super Bowl. So you're going to see that, and you're going to see them really rely on these linebackers to kind of hold down the run game in the middle there, because they're going to be running a lot of nickel, especially with the amount of corner investment they made. Jordan Lewis is a good nickel corner. Travis Hunter can also bounce over to nickel. It's probably be easier for him to translate to a nickel corner right away, but if he's trying to split time between learning to be their starting slot receiver as well as cornerback on their defense, that may be a bit easier of a task for them than an outside corner in this system. But even then, they have Jordan Lewis. They have some other guys that they've put some investment in, whether it's draft capital or signing them. You see Eric Murray, a strong safety. Darnell Savage is a free safety. You're going to have some more true split safety sets. So there's going to be a lot of that shell coverage looks with an even front, and they're going to put a lot on the plate of those linebackers to really maintain the run defense up front by working off that front, and then also having some responsibilities in coverage.
Okay. And I guess then from a draft standpoint, Josh, how do you analyze the Jaguars draft relative to your scouting reports and the players and where they were in your board?
Well, we'll just get this out of the way before we get into this. If Travis Hunter hits and becomes the player we all know he's capable of being, it doesn't matter what they did the rest of this draft. They were giving away their first-round pick. They got a quote-unquote generational prospect who could live up to that bill. So that would be a win in totality if they can get even 85% of what we think Travis Hunter could be. But I thought it was really interesting how they approached day 2 and specifically day 3 of this draft. Their first draft pick was Caleb Bransfeld, the defensive back out of Tulane. He was a little bit lower on my board, but you could see why he got picked so high with the height, weight, speed, athletic ability, and intangibles. And he really flashed in his 1 year at Tulane when he transferred over. You can see how he fits this defense. You just hope that the Jacksonville Jaguars do the proper development in OTAs and in the preseason to get him ready to play, because he will be playing early and often for this team. And I really do like to pick a Wyatt Milam in the back end of the 3rd round, somebody that could start right away, be Patrick McCary for a guard spot if that happens to happen during the preseason. But if not, you got an ultimate swing tackle, a 6 offensive lineman, and your future guard, in my opinion, in Wyatt Milam. So I thought that was an amazing pick by them. But in day 3, you kind of saw the mindset of drafting guys that fit the type of mold they want mentally, but also fitting athletic threshold, besides the Jack Kaiser pick, for example. But I thought that was an amazing value for what they got. We've covered him previously over the whole entire offseason going into the draft. We're big Jack Kaiser fans over here. But Tootin, Jalen McLeod, LaQuint Allen Jr., Jonah Mohan being that more athletic type of center offensive lineman. They were looking for guys to fit the mental role, but also fit their athletic threshold. And I thought, in my opinion, they double dipped on linebacker where I didn't think they could. They could have went on the defensive back route, draft another corner or draft another defensive end instead of bringing in the 2 veterans to rely on if Walker or Hines-Allen gets injured. But they did pick Jalen McLeod, who is that edge linebacker hybrid role, could develop into something. A lot of swings in day 3 for me. Some guys won't make this roster. A lot of day 3 guys don't. Some guys will stick on this roster, but I think they could have did a little bit of a better job on day 3, but I do like what the direction they're going with in their drafts, the type of players they're drafting.
Yeah, I thought some of the positions that they picked were a little off, but I'll get into my opinion in a minute. But Owen, what's your opinion of the Jaguars draft?
I think they definitely were trying to establish what they are looking to do with their scheme, specifically on offense and specifically with that running game. When bringing in Tootin, bringing in Wyatt Millum and Jonah Monheim, some of these more athletics, again, more guys who fit that zone style rushing offense that's going to fit into their Shanahan scheme. And then Travis Hunter, I mean, who's no brainer? Like, you have an ability where you have a hole in your slot receiver where you can add some more dynamic option to pair with Brian Thomas Jr., really make that a strength of your team, as well as you have a hole at corner, kind of like what Josh was saying. And while Travis Hunter isn't going to be a guy I think can step in and play corner for them right away because he has to split time between offense and defense, I would have liked to see them invest maybe another higher pick into a corner to be able to kind of take some of the pressure off of him to do that. I do think that they are looking to get more athletic on defense as well as on offense. So they got more athletic on offense to push towards that Shanahan scheme. On defense, you're looking for guys who can run some of these more off coverage zone concepts. You think about with the cover 3 stuff. We saw that a lot with like the Legion of Boom and the Dan Quinn defenses, like in Dallas, where you need corners who are long, rangy, can get upfield. Because basically, when it's that cover 3, you want to be able to push or get upfield, and it basically becomes man coverage as soon as the receiver passes the 20-yard threshold. So you need guys who are going to be able to walk down one-on-one man coverage down the field with a single high safety at your outside corners. So you're seeing them grab a guy like Travis Hunter. You're seeing them grab more of a rangy player in Caleb Ransaw to go behind Darnell Savage, who's also pretty rangy as a free safety there. So you're going to be seeing them add more athleticism, especially in their secondary, which they did with this draft class. And then moving on from that, going to their offense, they're going to be adding more athleticism along the offensive line and guys who can do better with vision and getting laterally and getting and working in space at running back. Definitely, if they didn't draft both Tootin and then get LaQuint Allen, this would have been someone who I was like, to throw back to our Indiana podcast we just got done doing, somebody that if I could see a running back like Roman Hemby at Indiana, if he came out this past year or upcoming year, he would excel in a system like this where it's a Shanahan offense where they're going to be using that running back in a lot of space.
Yeah, so I found it like on the surface, looking at the draft, no mock draft I ever did would have predicted what the Jaguars did, right? So they drafted 2 running backs and they drafted 2 linebackers. Usually those are positions I say you draft one of each, but like how often are 2 running backs on the field? So spending 2 draft picks when the likelihood is only one of them is going to be on the field at a given point in time, that seemed weird. And same thing, okay, so if you draft 2 linebackers, if one of them hits, I guess it makes sense because they were both day 3 guys. I definitely liked what they did on offensive line. So I definitely like the fact that they got Monheim and they got Milam because they could be, if we look at this draft 2 years from now, they may have gotten 2 offensive line starters out of the draft. So that part of it I liked. And then I also liked, as Owen pointed out, the fact that they took 2 defensive backs and they can interchange some of the players. Like, is he a slot? Is he a safety? Is he a slot? Is he a boundary? I think that gives them flexibility. And I definitely like that. So enough on the Duval Jaguars. Let us flip to the Raiders. So we're covering 2 teams with new coaches. So it makes it, let's say, difficult to predict the scheme, but this is not Pete Carroll's first rodeo. Owen, do you think there's any secret as to what Pete Carroll is going to do with the Raiders?
I don't think there is, especially after they draft Ashton Genty in the first round that high. Like, you already knew Pete Carroll coming from his history of both with the Patriots and the Seahawks, even his time at Stanford, or at USC, where they just want to run the football, establish that line of scrimmage, some of the more power gap stuff. They have the horses up front with the offensive line when they're talking about the run game with Dylan Parham, Jackson Powers-Johnson. They bring in Alex Kappa for Cincinnati. DJ Glaze is a good power blocker there. They do have players there that can do that style of running. And then even with a draft pick like Charles Grant, who is just an absolute ass kicker, at tackle. And even though you may think he's a guard, he might be a tackle. I think in this scheme, he should be their like a potential tackle for them on the road, especially if they maybe want to move off of like a Colton Miller, who doesn't really fit that scheme as much. He's a good pass blocker, more of an athlete, more than a people mover. So I do think they might be grooming Charles Grant to be that eventual successor at left tackle in this Pete Carroll offense. And then, you have a player like Genty, who, he's a bit undersized. He's not the massive man that was Marshawn Lynch in that Pete Carroll offense in Seattle. But Genty, low to the ground, dense, compact, isn't going to go down on first contact, and brings you some upside and some juice there. And then you pair it with the wide receivers they have, who Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, who's like a transition from tight end to wide receiver. Guys are going to go out there and block their asses off and be an element of this run game, be able to help them run the football, but also be threats to then push the ball down the field. You see Deontay Thornton Jr. they drafted, Jack Besh they drafted, guys who excel when you're going down the field and pushing the ball on the field. So it's going to be a lot of power run, establishing that line of scrimmage, having receivers that will block but also stretch the field, and then taking play action deep shots to really make sure and keep those safeties honest.
So, Josh, how about you? How would you describe a Pete Carroll offensive scheme with Ashton Genty?
I would describe it as the Raiders having the most hope they should have ever since, even before Derek Carr was their quarterback. We're going that far into their history. And it's not just because of Ashton Genty. It's not just because of Brock Bowers. It's because of Pete Carroll and how he's going to simplify things for this offense. This offense, let's be real, was very predictable, whether it was their head starting quarterback or their backup. They were a very predictable offense, very much wasn't efficient on the ground. Could get attempts in the air, could get completions, but really couldn't convert in the red zone for anything last year. This year, you have a lot to be excited for, not only with Brock Bowers being arguably the rookie of the year last year, having the best tight end season for a rookie of all time, Ashton Genty, of course, but you're going to see a lot of throwback offense with this team, putting Geno Smith under center more, running those 12 personnels heavy and often, running the ball first, second, and even third down on possessions. And if they want to work play action, they will work that mostly instead of shotgun offense. Once they get into 2-minute drills, if they need to push the ball deep downfield, they have the speedsters on the outside. They have the intermediate guys they can throw to, and they have Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer as safety blankets. They'll be able to execute shotgun offense, but get comfortable with under center play action and a lot of I formations, heavy gap formations for Ashton Genty to pound the rock this year. They're going to be effective in the run game, and they're going to have a real passing game out of play action that will be effective and turn the attempts down, but the completions up for this offense. I'm really excited to see what Pete Carroll does, reunited with Geno Smith and with the weapons he has, both in the rushing attack and the passing attack.
Yeah, so this Raiders draft is fun.
Mm-hmm.
As we've all alluded to, Ashton Genty in round 1, then Jack Besh at wide receiver in round 2, but they took more wide receivers later.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a fascinating draft to me because if I counted right, the Raiders drafted 3 wide receivers. They drafted Deontay Thornton from Tennessee, and there was another wide receiver I thought, Tommy. Okay, Tommy Mellott. He was a QB from Montana State, but they have him listed as a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm. He's making the transition over. He's a 4.39 runner when he was tested. He's a really good athlete at the quarterback position. If he learns it really quickly, he might get elevated from the practice squad. Hell, he might even make the 53-man roster right away. And with the receiving depth lined up on this depth chart, he has a real opportunity to grab that 5th spot and really make an impact right away for this offense.
Yeah, and that was kind of where I was going. Is that going into the draft, I don't think it was a secret that the Raiders needed to draft a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the fact that when the roster needs something, just go draft 3 of them. I like that mindset. Like, you just go in and you fix it. And then they also drafted, I believe, 2 offensive linemen, right? Because they got
Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant
and Caleb Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
So I like when a team like double dips in the draft, like they're saying we need this and we're just going to keep swinging until the players hit. So if the players hit, I think it's going to look good.
Yeah, and I especially like the pick of Tommy Metloff in the 5th or 6th round. I don't remember what pick he was. For the specific reason, it gives a little bit of leeway for Dante Thornton to develop into his own as a receiver. He's not going to be demanded on the field if he's not ready, kind of like a Devontae Walker last year. But we know if he develops properly, he has the speed, height, frame to be that prototypical burner X at the next level, and that could add another element to this offense. So kind of like the Jaguars, what they're doing this year, kind of ramping up for next year's offseason to get a real final picture into their second year. The Raiders are doing this with year one with Pete Carroll and kind of Tom Brady taking over the helm for the first year. You're going to see the transition into the second year, and I think the Raiders are set up in a little bit of a better position than the Jags right now, but time will tell.
Yep. So any closing remarks on the Raiders offense before we pivot to the defense?
I think one of the things that we should touch on a bit would be their tight end room specifically. Like they went and they got Brock Bowers last year and they utilized them as a weapon in the offensive passing game. But now they're going to be able to run Bowers, Mayer, and they also brought in Ian Thomas from Carolina, who never really flashed a ton of passing upside, but like was a solid run blocker for them, more of a move blocking type. So you're going to see them run like just playing more into that run game offense. It's going to be a lot of 12 personnel. We're going to have the two tight ends in the field. You have those two guys and like a player like Jack Besh, who's a converted tight end. You're just going to put a lot of size on the field there. And there are teams that are definitely moving more towards smaller defenses that deal with these kind of bigger or spread offenses with quarterbacks who are able to carve you up. They're going to challenge other teams like, okay, you guys are transitioning this way. We're going to go the opposite direction. Try to stop us now. And that's going to be their modus operandi to win, is just to punch teams in the mouth and hope that they can make up the talent discrepancy by beating you with grit and toughness.
Okay. The Raiders defense. Josh, how would you describe what you think the Raiders defense is going to look like?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Oh. I will filibuster.
Yeah. How would you describe what you think the Raiders defense is going to look like?
Yeah, so we have another team that is coming from like that more defense, Patriots defense, multiple looks. Their defensive coordinator is Patrick Graham, who's been their defensive coordinator. He stuck around from last season to this season. His experience as a defensive coach was as a defensive assistant from 2009 through 2015 with the Patriots. Linebackers coach, along every single level of that defense. Then he ended up moving on and getting his first defensive coordinator position with Miami in 2019 under Brian Flores, another Belichick disciple. So you have those influences on this defense, which I'm curious to see how that ends up working out, because the style of players they've added so far don't really scream to me that multiple style front. I do think that, like, specifically their four-man front here with Max Crosby, Malcolm Kuntz as their edge rushers, Tyree Wilson, who's a former 6th overall pick who hasn't really had the chance to shine here, profile more as like base, even front ends. So those guys, I'm not sure how well they would fit into more of a Belichickian system. You have Christian Wilkins, who, to just get it out there, they would have been a lot better last year if it had been for health. Like, they lost out Max Crosby for most of the season, Christian Wilkins for most of the season, Malcolm Kuntz for most of the season. It was really like just ravaged by injuries, and the fact that they are bringing all this talent back, and regardless of if they're going to adjust the scheme to fit them or not, they're going to be good players. And you also have players like I'm always going to be, and the Weekly Huddle channel is always going to be a Tonka Hemingway stand account. Absolutely love Tonka Hemingway. He's someone who I think can definitely push some of these depth players like Zach Carter and Leki Fotu, some guys that I just really don't see a ton of upside with. And they also went and drafted JJ Pegues, another like high upside athlete at the D tackle position. So they're looking for guys who can be more multiple, whether it's going to be Tonka Hemingway maybe being more of a 5-tech, 3-tech, somewhere along those that more wider alignment D tackles. And then you have your high-end talents at edge rusher. They've had investments in previous before this defense is kind of solidified before Patrick Graham got there. And they're just going to have to kind of work it with it there. Their linebacker room, I wasn't the super biggest fan of. They had Jermaine Pratt and Landon Roberts now before Jermaine Pratt got there after he got cut by the Bengals, it was Devin White, which makes you think they're going to be more sort of an attacking front, similar to that Patriots mold, where they're going to be sending guys to the line of scrimmage, different varieties of blitzes and bringing pressure from different areas, especially with a guy like Devin White and Landon Roberts. I do think that Jermaine Pratt brings in a more stereotypical linebacker type player. They've also got players on their depth of the roster like Tommy Eichenberg and Cody Lindenberg, who are more of those typical stack linebackers, more run defending, plug holes type players, and then like Amari Gaynor, who's another like hybrid front style linebacker. So they have a good mix there that they wanted to go more stereotypical Belichickian defense. I think their linebackers indicate that more so than their front. And then with their defensive backfield, they have and took swings on massive athletic upside players. Eric Stokes, I actually texted Newt about this when they were when I was looking at the Raiders a couple weeks ago, trying to figure out what their defense is going to be looking like this year. And I remember Eric Stokes kind of had a solid rookie campaign, but I was kind of wondering how he ended up just falling to the Raiders in free agency there. And it was a lot of injuries. Like he has the high athletic upside, he had some flashes, but it's going to be injuries there. You have him, Jeremy Chin, another super athlete at the safety position. They went and drafted Darian Porter, another super athlete, 999 RS score type player. So they have a bunch of players in their secondary. They want to be able to match players on their offense and take them away and be able to be athletes to be so more so if they have to send blitzes or do manufactured pressure, they can handle themselves one-on-one in like man coverage and other coverages that require them to be higher level athletes to complete.
Okay. So, Owen, that was a great filibuster. I'm also impressed that you waited 5 minutes into the filibuster to mention Tonka Hemingway. So, so Josh, what was your scouting report on Tonka Hemingway? You there?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Buffering. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, no.
That's okay.
Okay, it's delayed for me. I'm going to talk if it sounds like crap. No, when looking at
You're there. So maybe there's a lag on Josh's audio. Josh, can you hear us?
Oh, he's gone. I mean, if you want me to wax poetic about Tonka Hemingway for another 5 minutes, I definitely can. But he was definitely one of my guys. If you want, I can dive into the draft class here and talk about that, and then kind of parlay from what we were just talking about there with Tonka and how there's kind of they're directing their pathway with that.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, when you covered Tonka Hemingway, you were saying you're like, he's a day 3 pass rush specialist, right? Yeah. Like, and you said he's not a liability against the run, but he's not going to wow you with his run defense. Is that How close of a summary did I give?
I think you hit it nail right in the head. He's a D tackle who's like sub 290. Like he was 285 at South Carolina, and he played half a season with a club on his hand where he broke his hand. Didn't have that to be able to stack and shed and disengage. What made me super impressed with him was the fact that he was able to, because he's so twitched up and able to shoot gaps and work his hands to be able to keep his chest clean from offensive linemen. Not only was he a good pass rusher and be able to be a disruptor, but as a run defender, he had the ability to get into the backfield, and he had the flexibility to then bend around, replace what the offensive lineman was previously in the blocking scheme, and then make plays in the backfield despite not being able to get hands-on and be a disruptor. So he's a guy that, you don't want him there on goal line stands. I mean, I guess if he's like your 4th, 5th defensive lineman on the field, maybe. But if you don't want him to be your every down defensive tackle, being there on early downs to fill and fit the run, especially in short yard situations. He's going to make splashes in the run defense on some plays, and other plays he's going to absolutely get washed out of the way. So you'd want him to be there for your obvious passing downs, maybe as a rotational piece if you're going to risk him on an early down. I do think he can survive there, but for me, he's going to make his money as a pass rushing specialist and being more of a niche player in some even front defenses, which I think with the talent that the Raiders have, they're going to have to adjust specifically what they're going to run, and keeping it an even front. I think that gives them the best opportunity to be a player for this defensive front for them.
Yeah. And everything I remember about Tonka Hemingway is because of how you specifically covered him with Newt. So I learned that from you. So that's me. Like, I remember that was one of your guys.
100%.
And I remember what you had also said about him, kind of thing. So with that being said, so Oh, and if you were to look, like if you had to assess the Raiders' defensive draft, like I'm looking at this and it was, to me, their draft was more offense than defense. But they did get Darian Porter. That looks like that's a early round 3 pick. And then Tonka Hemingway plus JJ Peggs. And that was the defense. Oh, and Cody Lindenberg in round 7. What would be your assessment of their defensive draft and the players that they grabbed?
I think you definitely saw that because they've maintained the same defensive coordinator through this season, they had the guys in place that they already knew the system and knew the defensive coordinator and liked what they had. So they invested picks on offense to kind of establish their identity there. You see picks on offense like Ashton Jeanty, Deontay Thornton, Jack Besh, Charles Grant, that are going to be players who are going to get a lot more playing time because they're looking to change how the offense was run completely and overhaul it. The defense, however, they added some free agents just to get a better talent pool there, especially like Jermaine Pratt, Landon Roberts, Jeremy Chin, Eric Stokes. Those are free agents that are projected to be starters for them. But outside of that, they weren't really looking for a starting position when they hit the draft outside of like outside corner, which they ended up going and taking a swing at Darian Porter, which fits what they were looking for. Like I said, with Eric Stokes, Jeremy Chin, some of these players that are going to be more athletically gifted and can be match coverage players. So they had a guy in Darian Porter where his deficiencies were he was older, new to the position, former wide receiver, which gives him a unique blend of being low floor and high ceiling because you don't really know how well it's going to translate. He didn't really play a lot of pro or a lot of college ball at corner, but he does have the fact that also makes him an unknown about how much he can still grow at that position. And he also struggles a bit in run defense, but you have guys like Jeremy Chin, the linebackers you have in there that can make up for that and not have to rely on your corners to be your main run defenders. So you saw that be their one investment in the draft for a starter. The rest of those guys you talked about, JJ Peggs, Tonka Hemingway, those guys, while I like both the players and their high upside swings, especially those D tackles, athletically, I mean, JJ Peggs was a fullback for Ole Miss half the time while he was there. Tonka Hemingway, we just kind of covered, really niche but high upside athlete when it comes to being a pass rusher. So those guys are going to be more depth, going to rotate in and try to win backup positions because you're not going to have either of them supplant Adam Butler or Christian Wilkins, who were your stable starters from last year. And then you have a guy like Cody Lindenberg, who was another one of my guys. I thought he could have been like a round 4, round 5 pick because he is kind of this lower end athlete, but really super smart, middle linebacker type, does really well taking on blocks and being more of that run thumping middle linebacker type player. So you saw with their defensive draft picks, they're looking for depth roles, guys who can maybe potentially be eventual developmental starters, but outside Darian Porter, not one that needs to make an immediate impact. Whereas on offense, they were drafting specifically for starters and to fill holes in their identity that they're trying to build there. So that's why you saw a lot of doubling, tripling down on positions on offense. Where on defense, they didn't really invest as much as they needed to because they already had a lot of their starters in place.
Yep. And people will hear this from me a lot, but if your offense needs to be fixed, you'll end up drafting a lot of players on offense, right? Because most offensive players, at least your best 6 offensive players, play 100% of the snaps, the quarterback and the 5 offensive linemen. So if you need players at those positions, your draft will look like you're going to draft more offense. But once like a player like Jack Besh is cemented at wide receiver, you're not going to need to draft 3 receivers again. You only need to draft 1. You already have tight ends. You already have a running back. You may only need to draft 1 of those positions. Whereas on defense, if to your point, Owen, if your defense was close, you need a couple of pieces. Once you have offensive starters, it's easier to spend more time drafting role players for the defense. But you have to fix, my opinion is, you have to fix offense first. And they're in a reasonable position to draft a quarterback high next year.
Yeah,
right?
I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to second what you were saying and basically back you up with, once you if you're the Raiders this offseason, right, you need to establish what your identity is in offense, get some players that are going to be consistent snap takers. So you draft players like a Charles Grant, like a Jack Besh, like an Ashton Genty, who are going to establish that. And like you said, those are going to be guys who are taking the majority of your snaps. Whereas on defense, you can rotate through a ton of guys. So now moving forward, you take your limited but bigger shots at the offensive position, and then you can invest the multitude of picks, or like more of an abundance of picks on defense, on later round or middle round guys that can be developmental backups. And then the guys who were developmental backups 2-3 draft cycles before, they're the starters, and you can rotate the new guys in, and you can kind of make that your way to keep your team cheaper and constantly have fresh refilling of players that you can see if they're going to be guys for you or not. It's a lot easier to do that in defense, whereas in offense, you draft a backup guard. You see him in practice every day, but you don't really get a lot of game tape on him until you throw him into the fire, and now he's your starting guard. Whereas if you draft Tonka Hemingway, he's not your starting D tackle, but he subs in for Christian Wilkins every so often, and you can then get to see, like, in a limited game sampling size, okay, what does he look like against the other team right now? Do we have a guy there, or do we need to draft somebody else? So I think what you're saying is absolutely a fact, where you want to make short-term investments in the starting position and defense, so that way you can then start building your rookies to then generate stuff in what developmental wise and be able to rotate in on defense. But then on offense, you're looking for your bigger swings to be able to establish guys. You don't have to keep going back to the well there after you've already established your core players.
Yep. So let's pause for a quick commercial. So, Owen, do you want to let everybody know about all of the great things going on at the Weekly Huddle right now?
Yeah, so I'm Owen from the Weekly Huddle. I do stuff on my own YouTube channel at Weekly Huddle. I recently posted a video where I went through and predicted every single NFL game of the season, which established a 2026 NFL draft order, which me and Bill Sparks, I saw you there in the chat, Bill, we went through and did a 2-hour-long recording just breaking down all 32 picks of a mock draft for that, where Bill was just telling me about all these different players I never even have heard of or have scouted yet for this upcoming process. So not only is it a cool team-building exercise, I tell you why I think these teams are picking where they're picking and where they maybe need to add. Bill has his own opinion where he thinks they need to add based off where he sees them land. And then you also get a preview of picks and players that you should be keeping an eye on in this upcoming draft cycle and college football season. So I have that. I'm going to be posting soon. Newt Weston, another one of our draft professors, he's posting videos over on the Weekly Huddle. His top 10 offensive tackles from summer scouting is going to be going up in the next day or two. I was just editing that in the break between our last podcast and this one. And then for me, I'm going to be posting videos and stuff over there constantly. I've been kind of a little bit scattered brain between finishing up, school semester and then helping out getting those videos with Bill and Newt ready. So you'll catch me over there with some one-off videos. And then also over here on the Draft Professor every Mondays and Wednesdays. Mondays right now in the summer, we're covering specific teams' draft classes. This past Monday, we did Georgia. The Monday before that, we did the entire conference of the MAC. Today, I was on the Wednesday episode where they do the same thing, where we cover the Indiana University class, which was super surprising. I think the takeaway from that one for me was I was, I guess, surprised, overachieving. I'm trying to think of the word I'm thinking of, where I was another synonym for surprise, but they're just all blew my socks off with these players that I was surprised how Indiana is going to have a team that's going to be fielded maybe just as good as last year. So you could have caught me at that earlier. And then obviously tonight's where we're going through and breaking down the different teams. We've gone through the majority of the AFC. We got another team or two in the AFC and one more team in the NFC to cover. And then we'll be all set for the NFL season, where we're going to have all these teams previewed, ready to go. We'll have a bunch of college teams previewed and ready to go for the college season. You'll have everything you'll need to know for be a football fan going into this fall. So you can catch me here Monday, Wednesdays. You can catch me over on the Weekly Huddle YouTube channel, and you can catch me on the Weekly Huddle Twitter.
Yeah, so you can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It is the same on X and YouTube. You can also catch the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft podcast on Spotify. And what you're going to get if you follow the channel is daily draft content. So the best thank you you can give is to hit that subscribe on YouTube, please, and thank you. That's going to help us trend in front of more people. And in addition to that, it reminds us who our followers are. So every Monday and Tuesday, we're breaking down a different college draft class. So I believe Monday we're doing Oklahoma. Tuesday we are doing Alabama. Wednesdays and Thursdays we're breaking down NFL team schemes. And then on Fridays we are breaking down the quarterback class in this upcoming draft. And then in addition to that, we're also in the month of July, we're about to start Sunday podcasts. So the Sunday evening podcast, you're going to see a lot of guests come on. Ian Cummings and Dalton Miller have both committed to coming on a podcast, and that will be on a Sunday night, coming soon to a podcast near you in July. With that being said, a couple of other things I'd like to point out with what Owen said. So you're going to see draft professors on plenty of podcasts, and that's kind of what we do here. So you'll see Bill Sparks has been on Owen's podcast. Bill Sparks was on Jacob Roach's podcast earlier, right? So there's a lot of draft professors that have their own podcast channels, and you're going to see different draft professors everywhere, and that's kind of who we are. So if you like this content and you want to come on a podcast and help us make some of it, just reach out, NFL Draft Fanatic on Twitter, and tell me who you are and, what episode you watched and what you'd like to help us make. But this is a lot of fun. I have a front row seat to what I would consider to be the best draft content around. Like, I remember Tonka Hemingway from Owen and Newt covering him in November. And I'm not reading it, I'm listening to Owen talk about it. And that's kind of what we do. So we're going to be going through the whole draft class here. Like Owen, one of the other things I wanted to point out too is I love that, you get a list of players and you watch the players, right? You don't have any prejudice going in. You wouldn't have known Indiana from Illinois prior to prepping for the podcast, right? And then you come out and you're like, yeah, this Mikel Kamara is a dude.
Oh, my God.
Right? And then D'Angelo Pons, that's a dude. We're going to be talking about them for the next 10 months. Right?
I'm excited. I'll be talking about them specifically. You can bet that over on the Weekly Twitter. You're going to see a lot of Kamara and Pons over on there.
Yeah. So, I have a lot of fun just hearing Owen's reactions, right? It's for me, that's worth the price of admission, because most of the time when Owen is covering a player, frequently it's the first time he's seen them, right? Because he gets a list of players to watch for me or Bill or somebody, and then he comes on the podcast and he talks about who he's watched and who he's liked. And that's kind of who we are and what we do, and we hope that you enjoy that emotional reaction too, I think is the right way to put it. So
passionate is how we like to describe it.
Yeah. So for Owen, sorry that Josh had some technical difficulties there at the end. For Owen, Josh, myself, the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.